This is Julie Pearson, Little Thunder. Today is December 11th, 2011, and I'm interviewing Kelly Haney at his home in Norman, Oklahoma. Kelly, you've had an amazing career as a politician on the state and tribal level. You're a businessman, but most people know you as an artist, and they continue to prize your artwork, which now includes many sculptures as well as paintings. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you very much.
Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born at home in Seminole County, north of the city of Seminole, near a place called Turkey Creek, in November 12, 1940.
And any brothers or sisters?
I have two brothers and two sisters. One of my siblings, two of them are now deceased, one brother, one sister, so I still have one brother and one sister.
How about your earliest memories of doing art?
Well, I have always done art. First of all, I acknowledge that what I have is God gift. I didn't choose to have this art ability, I just do. If I can think it in my head, I got all these little messages go down my fingertips and create what's in my mind. That's basically, sounds simplistic, but that's for me.
Mm-hmm.
And many artists who do any kind of arts, whether it's writing or visual arts or even dance, I think they visualize what they have in the mind first and then interpret in the form that they choose.
How about your folks? What did they do for a living?
Oh, many things. My father, in my early years, was in World War II, and when he came home, he started farming. It was at that time and period in our history when the government was trying to make farmers out of Indians. And he was a good farmer, but one year things didn't turn out, and we left the farm and went to town. Then eventually he became a minister in the United Methodist Church. It was a Methodist church at the time, the Indian Missionary Conference, and he was there for some 35, 40 years as a minister. In the meanwhile, he was a great storyteller, and he was well noted for that. He was a flute maker and a jeweler, among other things. So the fact that I had this art ability actually it's almost like hereditary. It's kind of like, I remember my grandfather and grandmother doing arts and so forth, and so it was.
Your father then was minister for a while for the Baptist Church.
Okay. He became a minister for many years. He served in the ministry. While he wasn't seminary trained, he was very bright. He was an avid reader, and in my opinion, after having gone to school, and I had planned to go into the ministry, and so I have a lot of at least background and studies in the ministry and theology. Knowing the way he believed and thought it was amazing that he understood as well as he did about the Bible and about the message that comes from the Bible. So he was very good at that. He also, in his later life, became an instructor at Bacone College in the language department for the Muskogee language. And he wrote some of the curriculum. He made his flutes. He played at the Tulsa Philharmonic, and he had also performed in Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. Did some bit pieces in movies and so forth. He just was a handsome man with long white hair, and he fit right in. He had a third grade education, and that really tells me and others about the way life is. Because you don't have the opportunity to get a formal education doesn't mean that you're not smart. Right. And he had the ability to learn and know and to dream and visualize what he can do, and he did as much as he could with the skills he had, probably much more than most people would think. My mother had an 8th grade education, and from mother I had two things. One, my dad understood and talked about our history and about the ceremony grounds and so forth, but my mother lived it. So she was there, she lived it, and she knew the importance of our culture. But from my mother, I learned the value of work. I think that's probably a great thing because you cannot get along and succeed in life unless you know how to work. And I have that ability, and I can't slow down today because I just keep working.
So, when you were in primary and secondary school, you took, did
Let me
you
go
have a
back
chance
just,
to take?
let me go
Oh, sure.
just a second. Finish with my mother. My mother later, she had never had to work because during the time she was growing up, oil was plentiful in Seminole County, and her father, my grandfather, had some oil on his property, and it produced a lot of revenue for them, and they took care of other families during those times when it was needed. Well, she grew up rather wealthy, but after he was deceased and the oil went away, and she married my dad, she had to learn how to work, and she did. She went to work and at odd jobs, and eventually she became a nurse's aide, and she was at St. Francis Hospital in Tulsa for many years, and just really, she just loved the place, loved her work. But unbeknownst to us, she was in her 60s, and she went and got her GED.
Wow.
Well, to me, that means she did place a high value on education, and the fact that at that age she was willing to go back and never told anybody. She just worked it out, but she's kind of funny in the sense that she would prefer to speak our language, and she would carry on with other people like she didn't know English. Well, she could work a crossword puzzle and I can't, so she was pretty slick, I'd say. But she was a bright lady, and the question always does come up when they first start art, and she's obviously the one who knows. I asked her one day, and she said, well, Kelly said, when you were 2 years old, you were able to sit down and draw what you saw. So, like I said, just a natural gift. From there, we did a lot of community fishing in the rivers and big sand places, and I used to carve. And living in the country, we all had knives because that's what you use is one of your tools. So I learned how to make tool items. And I was 6 years old when I made my first sculpture. So the question is, when did you start sculpting? Oh, I was 6 years old. That's about 65 years ago. And our home was on a dirt road at the time. It was red mud. And my sister would make pies, and I got to pushing around and found out that, hey, I can make things. So I made the head of Abraham Lincoln. It was about this tall, and this such that had a hat and tie. And I have no idea today why I selected that person, but I did. And my mother, she went and bought me little paints, little cheap paints and brushes, and I remember painting it. But she was my biggest supporter in terms of helping me to develop my skill, because we didn't have much, but whatever she could afford, and with drawing and art supplies, she would make sure that I got something to work with. She probably got tired of me drawing on her walls.
Probably.
So that's kind of her history.
Her influence.
Just a summary of her.
Yeah, that's great. So did you have any art classes too in school, or not too much?
Well, in the rural areas, you just don't have art. Much of them don't have art today, unfortunately. But we moved to Shawnee, and Dad was trying to find work, and Mom was too. So I went to school in Shawnee at Washington School, and then somehow by 5th grade, I had gone to a school, Harrison School in Shawnee Public School. Then they had a formal art class, and I started taking formal art classes. and I began to understand the principles of art, which the teacher took time to do with me. One of the amazing things about that period, though, I looked around and I saw a print of Drawbridge by Van Gogh, and Mona Lisa, and A Whistler's Mother, and Blue Boy by Ginsberg, all these different prints around the room. I have had in my lifetime the opportunity to see the originals of all of those images. So, of course, I was seeking them out when I go. So it was quite an experience, and she was very helpful to me, and I found that I had that little niche that people enjoyed, and I enjoyed doing it. But it was at that time I started selling paintings or drawings. The kids would want me to draw something, so if they had a quarter, I'd draw whatever they want me to.
So that was your first sale?
Well, that was my first sale, I believe. Well, actually, he was younger than that. I had my uncle who came and watched me. He was an artist himself. He came down, saw my work, and he'd give me 50 cents for some. It was just his way of encouraging me, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've been selling art for a long time.
Cool. So in high school, were you still selling and people getting you to do posters? Or?
Well, I didn't in school, and I went to junior high in Shawnee, and they continued to have a formal art class there. The teacher, Bill Malone, is still living and is one of my great friends, and he took a special interest in me as well. And so I was able to utilize that training in school to develop my skill. I moved to the high school, and they had what they call trade art, which meant that I could take art 3 hours a day in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. I'd take all my regular courses, but I would take art, and I took the art. And it was quite I think that was probably the beginning of my more formal understanding of what art principles and concepts were, so that was very helpful. I moved back to Seminole, out in the rural area. They no longer had art, but I kept it up. I mean, I would play basketball and ran track and played baseball, go to school, but at night I would go into my room and I would draw and paint, and just kind of self-study.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you went on to, you went on to Bacone.
Did.
For a year, was it a year or two?
I went 2 years. I graduated with their program there at Bacone College. There I studied art under Dr. Dick West, who was a very prominent artist, one of the great leaders of the Indian art movement in history, and is a wonderful man, a funny person, great artist, and I was able to learn many things under his instructions. But might say too, though, that it was at that time when I started mostly doing Indian art. Mm. I really didn't do much Indian art, if any, until I went to Bacone College, and I began to understand the Indian history a little bit, and the importance of how you do, at least his style of art. Its styles have changed over the years, but it was important for me at that time to know what he had to teach me.
So did you try to do a little bit of the so-called flat style? Or?
I did. I'm very good at it,
mm-hmm.
quite frankly. I mean, it was simple mm-hmm. and easy to do, mostly because the hardest part for me is drawing. Today, it's hard. So it takes a while to finally get exactly mm-hmm. what I want. Mm-hmm. And once I do that, the rest is easy, mm-hmm. At least for me. Painting, sculpting, the rest just comes easy. I've just got to make form, but I'm really cautious when I'm doing realism to make sure that the anatomy is correct. I'm working on a horse right now, and I've got to know every bone structure, every muscle structure of a horse. So I go and I have one special one. I'm taking hundreds of pictures in every little part of that horse. So I spend a lot of time in research in doing that. But that's different than the early times of Indian art. At the time I was studying art at Bacone, Indian art was considered flat with lines through it. It's what I call a coloring book concept, you see. And that was easy for me to conquer. Just the drawing part was difficult. But once I did that, I was very successful in winning many competitions.
You entered the Philbrook?
I entered and won in Philbrook, and I had entered in many competitions, 5 civilized tribes, and I have a nice collection of memories, I guess, of awards that I won over the years using that style. But that was not who I was. That's not my style. And but that's what the Indian art was considered. And I partially made a living out of it. They helped me get through school, you know, so that's what I did. Then later on, I started working with my own style. That came after the art instructions at the University of Arizona in Tucson. At that time, I had received a scholarship from the Rockefeller Foundation scholarship. And there were 19 Indian artists across the country selected to go to that school for training. They took care of all of our expenses, you know, planes, room, food. I mean, they just took care of everything. And in fact, I took several classes. One was in jewelry making, and I can't hardly believe it today, but they had slabs and slabs of silver and turquoise and just anything and everything we needed to learn. And I took some oil painting classes, which I had already, but I began to develop my skill there. But two things happened that I can recall about that. One of my instructors in jewelry business was Charles Lolema. And Charles was one of the great jewelers who started this whole movement of contemporary Indian jewelry. I say he started, there may be others, but he's one I remember who was doing that. That was great. He said, you know, you don't have to do it the old way. You're an artist, you're an individual, you're an Indian. You can do anything you want to because that's who you are. And so that was important. The other instructor was Fritz Shoulder, who was considered one of the premier abstract painters of Indian subjects, for one, in the world. And he was a young man at the time, but he was the instructor there, so my art went beyond my own understanding, what I liked, what I'd learned about traditional. Yeah, from flat, two-dimensional to realism, and then I began to understand this concept of contemporary abstract art. I have done abstract art, and I enjoy doing it. I just don't have the time. My whole life basically is based on time management because of my background and what I do.
When you decided, so after your training at the University in Arizona, did you take a step into art as a professional full-time, or did you?
Well, I came back to Oklahoma
school?
City University and pursued my original goals. That was to develop my art skills, but also for the ministry. And so I have a lot of background in the schools of theology and so forth and so on. And I had that, but all of that really is important because I paint what I think about life. And my life is can be considered complicated, but for me it's not. It's just the way I am and who I am. So and I did learn at OCU, and they allowed me at that point to just do what I wanted to do. So I did a mixture of sometimes doing traditional flat paintings, and other times I do abstracts, and I just kind of ran the range, and I guess I was looking for my own style or whatever, you know. So that was important, and I learned a lot, and OCU's been a great inspiration to me over the years. I was on the board of trustees for OCU for a number of years, and got a honorary doctorate from OCU in law, of all things.
Oh, how neat.
But of course, I was in the legislature 22 years. That's obvious that I know a little bit about it. So then when I left OCU, and when I was still at OCU, I went to work for J.C. Penney Company downtown Oklahoma City, and that was in 1962, late 1962. And I went in to work 2 weeks to help them with Christmas decorations. And in the meanwhile, the manager quits, and the assistant manager comes in, and for the first time I heard, Mr. Haney, would you like to be a display manager? And I didn't hesitate. I said, yes, sir. Well, I had no idea what I was doing, but you guys learn, and confidence was.
Eye.
You just go, and so for several years I worked with in that industry in display management and so forth, and it gave me a better understanding about how to work with people. Understanding that I grew up in a very traditional Indian environment, so the language that was spoken was our native language, and I was with my aunts, uncles, grandparents, and other people in the community who were native people. And for those who grew up during that period the way I did will understand that it was a little difficult to talk to non-Indians. And so I was still in that transition phase whenever they gave me this job. But I learned that people, no matter who they are, they're willing to help me do my job. And they didn't care that I was Indian. They just wanted to make sure I did my job right, because if I did my job right, they got to sell more things, you know. So it all worked out really good. I learned a lot from that company. But the young man who hired me, who was assistant manager at the time, was transferred to New York City, and he eventually became the chair of the J.C. board worldwide. And we ran into each other years later, he being who he was and me being state senator, and we had the best time.
Pretty amazing. In your background in finance, had you taken a few finance classes at OCU?
I didn't.
Okay.
Most of mine was really centered around liberal education and religion. I was working, not necessarily in art, but in community development at the time. And I was looking for another job opportunity, and I was called by this person who became a friend of mine. I had interviewed with him earlier. But he called and said, Mr. Haney, we'd like for you to apply for this training that's going to take place in Philadelphia. And I said, well, for what purpose? And it was for economic developers. And I said, well, what the hell's an economic developer? I didn't know, you know. And he told me, well, it's to help create businesses in inner cities because of the current situation and to develop those skills. So they paid a nice stipend, and so they paid for everything. And I had a family too, though, so I had to consider
And was
that.
this like in the mid-70s?
God, I'm trying to remember. Late 60s? I think it was the late 60s, something like that. And it was the late 60s. So I went to school in Philadelphia at the Progress Management Institute, and the instructors there came from Temple University and their business partner in Horton School of Business and Finance. Instructors would come and instruct. There was a special program designed specifically for these men and women that are trained to go back in different cities across the country. Everyone had a degree in business. And some had master's degrees. I came at the top of the class because, and I've never worked as hard as I did, but it came easy. Business concepts and so forth is something that really, comes to me as easy as art does. I just haven't had enough time to really work at it as I would like to have. But as you know, becoming chairman of appropriation, I've certainly had an opportunity to deal with issues of finance and budgets and so forth.
Right. So you worked for J.C. Penney's, you took that training in Philadelphia. You continued, I guess, doing your artwork.
I've always done my artwork. I mean, since 2 years old. I guess it just, for me, art is like breathing. I just do it. I mean, it's like I have no choice. You get up and you breathe. I get up and I got to do some sort of art, or at least think a concept through, say.
Did you put your work in any Oklahoma galleries to start with?
I did. I had them in several galleries. Five Civilized Tribes Museum in Muskogee probably has the largest collections of my early originals. And then Gilcrease and other galleries across the state. And then I had an opportunity to exhibit in California. And I was an early exhibitor in Santa Fe, and I was a prize winner in painting at that time.
At Indian Market,
Indian
Santa Fe
Market.
Indian Market.
And then when I became a legislator, everything stopped. I mean, my
Yeah.
art didn't stop.
Yeah.
It really reduced the amount of time I was spending with it. So I just did it locally, and my market has always been good locally. Of course, I've developed that.
Now, when you entered in Santa Fe, you had found your voice with this more realistic style that we know you for.
Right. It was realism, and people there seem to like it. Of course, in Santa Fe, there's those who do realism, and people really love what they do because they do a good job. And then there's a more contemporary, sometimes abstract work coming out of Santa Fe now. So it fits a whole broad category.
So when you got into politics, what were the advantages or disadvantages of coming in with that strong art as an artist, basically?
Oh, the ability to imagine, to develop concepts and to work through them. In creating a piece of legislation, for instance, I promoted the alternative education programs in Oklahoma.
That's wonderful.
And the reason is that I fit every category of a school dropout. And somehow I figured if I can make it, we need to help these kids to make it. That they're not dumb, they just learn different. That's what I learned about that whole process. Well, my next job was to get these legislation passed and start putting large amounts of monies into that program throughout the state. And now it's kind of like a regular program, in the state of Oklahoma. Now, understanding this about public service, when I did that, I understood at that time that those students, thousands and thousands of students, will never know my name, will never know my face, but the fact that I help is important to me. But that's probably from my ministerial perspective and background. For me, public service, elected office, was my ministry, and that's how I looked at it.
Yeah, that's such an important program. When you first began to get into prints, you mentioned that a couple of, I think it was Blackbeard Bozen and Woody Crumbo were sort of instrumental in guiding you. What, first of all, made you decide it's time to start doing prints?
Well, I had an office in Oklahoma City. I ran for the company out of Philadelphia in business development, and we did business packaging and finance, and, feasibility studies, et cetera. So I began to get hold of an idea that I want to go into business for myself one time. I always did want to, so that wasn't a big surprise. But I needed a business plan. And so it took me 2 years to develop a business plan that I was comfortable with, that I could make a decent living for my family, number one. Being an artist was hard to do, and it's hard today to do it. So I may be a better businessman than I'm an artist, quite frankly. I mean, I just put a lot of time and effort into marketing and sales. So having said that, that's kind of where I went with it. I took my experience and background as a developer and applied it to the development of an art business. It happened to be an art gallery, and I'm looking for many concepts to help me through this process and how to maximize my income and so forth. Ran into Woody Crumbo. I have to tell you, I thought he was deceased. He walked in my office one day and knocked on the door, and he said, "I'm Woody Crumbo." I said, "You can't be, you're dead." We became great friends afterwards. His art was the first piece of what's called Indian art I'd ever seen. It was at my aunt's house. I was just a young boy. And it was one of those little spirit horse, they call them. Like it was pinned onto the wall, and that was the first one. So it went back a long way, and I seen his works and books and so forth. But we became great friends. But he said something to me that was important at that point in terms of my development of a business concept. He said, "Kelly, I can have 3 to 5 art shows on a weekend." Oh, yeah? He said, "Yeah, just have prints. You just sent prints to different places, and at the time you didn't have to be there. Today they want you to be there, so I don't do that much anymore." But and that sounded right, and I was able to do like 3 shows on a weekend across the country.
He was a good businessman
Well,
too,
he was a good businessman. He understood that concept. And so he was really important to me in the development of that concept of the prince, and that's really where it came from. The other one who also was important was Black Bear Bosun. Black Bear Bosun had both a prince business, but he also had a gallery. So
Was it in Tulsa?
It was in Wichita.
In Wichita.
And I would go up to his gallery to look at it and visit with him about how to run an art gallery and the business part of a gallery. So really it was me putting that gallery concept together with Woody Crumble's concept of prints, merging them together and making a program. And I was very successful at it in the early years. I had sometimes as much as 100 galleries ordering prints from me from all over the world. I eventually got out of it. I don't know why, but when I did get into the legislature in 1980, I do remember losing $100,000 of income my first year. And so every year I continued to lose, but I would never trade my experience in the legislature for anything. It was a great experience. It was one of the things I like to do, and that's to help people. So I have a great love for that. But it did take a toll on my income, and it did for a long, long time. And so I'm just now able to make a decent living.
Yeah. Well, and you, so you had this amazing career in the legislature. You even had a run for governor, which was really exciting because the first Native, candidate running for governor. Yeah. What was the learning experience, I guess, in that?
Well, first of all, I would do it. I'm glad I did it. I'm the only full-blood Indian that's ever served in the legislature. I rose to be the chairman of the most powerful committee in state government. I served on the executive council for the National Council of State Legislators. I was only the second Oklahoman to ever do that. And so I had a lot of good experiences as an Indian person. After 22 years in the legislature, and much of that in appropriations and head of it, I walked away with my integrity intact. That was really important to me because had I been doing it for myself, perhaps I might have done some of those goofy things people do. But I was also the image of a nation, of an Indian nation. And I had, in my mind, I had to keep myself above board at everything I did because I didn't want to embarrass our people. Because if I did, then we'd be we'd shoved back a little bit. So I was able to do that, and I think I accomplished that. Quite frankly, I just kind of got tired of being in the legislature at that position that I was in. That's a powerful position. I'd done it for years and years, and by this time I knew what was going to happen every year, and just got to work through unique problems every year and so forth, and I loved it. But I thought it was time to move on, and in my opinion, I was probably, and still believe that I was the best qualified candidate for governor at the time. Had more experience than all of the candidates put together. Understood budgets better than any candidate that was running because I had been the head of it. I helped to create the school finance act that funds schools throughout the state of Oklahoma. I'd done all of these things, and I just thought it was time. But there's something else that I'm a little cautious about how I say it, but there's still that issue of Indianness. In Oklahoma, there's still that issue of color. I don't care what they say. There's still that issue, because I faced it when I was in the legislature, and when I go somewhere wearing jeans, I'm treated, quote, like an Indian. If I wear my suit on, they think I might be somebody. So that, and I know that exists in Oklahoma today. One of my early experiences being very, very young in courthouse, and we woke and seeing a sign. I was going to want to go to the restroom. One said whites only, the other says coloreds only. No, I wasn't white. No, I wasn't colored like they're talking about. I don't remember what I did, And I've gone through that experience. I've gone through the experience of different states refusing to let me into motels, refusing to let me into restaurants, and the irony of it, all those that had military uniform on. But you never forget those, and I'm glad I went through that experience. because it taught me and showed me what other people of color have gone through and continue to go through. And so that really gave me a greater insight, probably helped me more in later years in retrospect than I knew. So that was important. And even today's society, while it's not as open as it is to most people of color, there still is an underlying feeling toward Native people and people of color. But I have to be quick to say that it goes the other way too. Native people can be pretty, have damaging thoughts about other people, really for no reason, people who did nothing to them. So this is kind of a human behavior and thought process, and somehow we got to get past it, and that's one of the things I do when I'm working around the world. So it helps me to bridge that gap a little bit.
Yeah. Towards, I guess, the end of your service in the legislature, you did a sculpture for the Capitol Dome.
Yes, the Governor Keating had taken the initiative to build a dome, and under great duress and conflict, but I'm glad he did. It now looks like a Capitol. I mean, it's a great building. In fact, I will say to him, Governor Keating, I appreciate your building that $25 million pedestal for my sculpture.
Right, that's great.
It was at that time, and when we were getting ready to build the dome, in the original design of the dome, there was a sculpture that was designed for it. So the art committees got together and they started thinking about the kind of art they would like to have on top. And this is where much more goes into decision making than most people know. They were building the land run sculptures in downtown, big town, Oklahoma City. And so the concept, well, we need something to balance it. We need an Indian. And then got to think, well, Alan Hazard's sculpture is in the front, but it's a woman. So we need to have an Indian man. That's how it all started. And they wanted something, quote, generic. That kind of threw me a little bit, but I think ultimately they're correct because of the 39 federally recognized tribes in Oklahoma. You can't just have one up there. So I'll get into that a little more. But there are over 20 artists who submitted portfolios, and I was one of 6. We were given 30 days to come out with a model. The day before I left for Paris is when I got my notice that I was one of those selected. We had some officers in Europe that I was, I kind of kept watch over, and went there and went to Belgium and so forth, and went on to Taiwan and went to Japan. And when I got home, I had 2 weeks left, and I'm thinking, oh, I'll never get this done. I'll never get this done. And I almost didn't submit anything because that thing, but my mind keeps turning and working. The first thing I do is look for a composition. It's not the drawing, it's a composition, the way it worked. And they had pretty much established what they wanted. So I was driving from Seminole to the Capitol. And going by Tinker Air Force Base. And this thought came to my mind. It's just like and I reached over and got an envelope with a little pen, and took less than 5 seconds. I just sketched what I was wanting, so I don't lose the concept. And after that, 2 weeks later, I had a sculpture ready for him. But before that time, I did submit a letter to the ethics committee to see whether or not I could even compete in that competition. And the letter they sent back to me just basically said that since the funds were private funds, that I could. And so I felt good about that. The second thing I'm happy about is that whenever the 6 artists, we all put our art, we had to take our names off the clay or wax piece, so no one knew exactly who did what. It's called a blind competition, and that's where I won the competition. And it was unanimous. And I was real pleased with that. I eventually, though, went on to gifted them my work at no cost.
Mm.
I just felt like it was an honor to do it, and on behalf of me and my family, and as you know, in our Indian way, it's a great honor just to give.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, you know, there's no greater honor to have this one, and we're just going to give it to the state of Oklahoma. Of course, my brother would always say to me, well, you shouldn't have gave away my share, you know. But that's how it came to be, and I did a sculpture about 19, 20 inches tall in clay, and we converted it into 22 for sculpture.
Yeah, that's a huge undertaking. How did...
Well, I don't have to know everything, see?
The foundry sort of cast pieces?
In almost any profession you're in, it could be in production, you still need other people's help.
That's right.
And I don't assume that the kind of work that I do today that I have to do all that.
Right.
I never believed I needed to stretch a canvas to be a good artist. Some people thought you did. Some people thought you had to make your own paint. I'm thinking, I don't see anything creative about either one of those, you know? And so the foundry does what it does.
Mm.
I do what I do, and it's just a complement of two.
Right.
My job is to make sure they do it right.
Right.
You know, and I keep on top of that.
So you did come in a couple times during the process?
I do. In the process, I'll come in and to clean it up. So clean it up and make sure all the lines are clear and clean, and it's to my standards. And so that's what I do.
And I think you also donated sculpture, didn't you, to Seminole College, or was that one that they purchased?
Let's see, so many. I think they purchased that one. It's a replica of the Guardian.
Of the Guardian.
After the Garden, I made 7 replicas, and I have one left, and I think it's going to go to the new Army Reserve building in Broken Arrow.
Well,
So I'm looking forward to that.
yeah. You did a bronze sculpture. You had a commission, I guess, from Chickasaw Nation.
I did. They wanted one of the Chickasaw warrior, and I did a lot of research. One of my paintings that I did eventually became a sculpture. I researched over 20 years, and when I was ready, I went and did it.
Wow.
That one took a lot of concentrated, focused research, because I was trying to capture a Chickasaw warrior prior to the coming of the European. So going back and research and looking at old lithographs and reading to see what the clothing was like and so forth, that was really important to me. And I want to get back to that, about how I started research at a very young age too. It's important for who I am. But that's what I did, and there's some unique things about that sculpture that I really like. One is they wore long earrings, kind of different than I've ever seen. It looked like a golf tee. And they're coming through the ear, both sides of the men did. I thought that's unique to them, and their haircut was unique. But one of the things I put on the sculpture was on the shield. They made shields like most tribes, just using leather and so forth. But they also use alligator hide. And you can understand that when it hardens, there's no air going to come through that.
Yeah.
But the other one they used was tree barks. And think about that. If you shoot a bow, it's not going to go very far into the wood, and just does that and boing, you know. And so the Chickasaw warrior, the shield is made out of wood bark, so to speak, you know. So it was fun doing all that research and seeing what they did at that time to do what they did.
Right. Wow. Yeah, and you know, you've done a real combination of Plains images and also Seminole and Creek images as well. And research is real important.
Really important to me. Let me explain about the research. I was in the 10th grade, and my English teacher knew that I read my books. And when we gave oral reports, I'd get up and I'd have a great time. I could tell stories. My father was, grandfather. So I just told stories in my books, and they loved it. But when it came time to write, she knew I had great difficulty in writing. Um, and she said, came and said, Enid, I said, I know you're reading your book. I want you to do me 3 drawings for every book you read. Well, that was a challenge. I said, wow. I thought this would be easy. Well, it wasn't. Because in order to do the Ides of March, I had to study clothing, architecture, topography. I had to study several books to get that one drawing. See, and that's the same process that I use today. I go through and spend a lot of time researching to make sure that, to the best of my ability, I have it correct, and that's what I do. I did one of a Sioux warrior once. It's called "I Will Choose My Time," and I painstakingly, I didn't do it for anyone, it's for myself, and. When I finally finished months later, the first thing I did, I had my salesperson take it up to North, one of Dakota's for an art show. And when they got to the old men looked in, they thought a Sioux must have painted that, because they said everything was right and the colors were right and so forth, so on. And that really made me happy. It, more than a judge or award could ever do, even the sale, just to know that they felt like I had done something that was correct. So that was important. So research was important to me. Research started with my English teacher, understanding that I had a special need, that I could finish the work, but I had to do it differently. And years later, I was on, I think it was Johnny Carson's show or something like that, a woman show, without my art in my earlier days of painting. And by this time, she had moved to another state, Virginia. Her name was Virginia, she's Virginia Brown. She called me to let me know she saw that show.
How cool.
I told her, you know, I probably wouldn't have been there, wouldn't for you, you know.
Right. Well, even though you got tired of state politics, you did, you were a tribal councilman for Seminole Nation, and then you ran for chief. And how did that enrich your art experience?
Oh. Everything I do affects my art experience, because basically almost any one of my work that you see, with the exception of something like Chickasaw Warrior, which is just capturing a time and period in history, all the works that I do primarily have one message. So once you get past all the flowery words of art critics and critics' suits and it's usually one message, very simple. And so that's what I do. Chickasaw Warrior was kind of an exception, but the rest of the time it's pretty straightforward. If you just look for a central message, you get to my work.
And it was an opportunity, of course, to do some things in your tribe.
Truthfully, I didn't want to do it. It wasn't what I wanted to do, but at that time, the tribe was going through some very difficult times politically, organizational wise, and bad press almost daily coming out of there. And what really finally got to me is a lot of young Seminoles in general said, I'm ashamed to be Seminole, you know, because the behavior of our, some, it's not all, but some of the council people and so forth, and there was this friction between the chief and so forth, and so no one could help them, because the problem was that they had no court of jurisdiction that they can go to solve their problem. Everything was internal. So the CFR court, the Bureau of Affairs, they couldn't interfere, couldn't go to the federal court, couldn't get to state court. The only court they had was a council. The council of any body, or legislative body, is a political body. You line up on sides, and whoever's got the most on your sides get to win. It has nothing to do with justice, or, you know, and it's no different. The state legislature tried to make a decision by saying it's still political, and that's what it was. They couldn't get past that. It was difficult. So I thought, I took a long time thinking about it. I prayed about it for months. I mean, seriously, just thinking, gee, I want to do this, God. You know, I meant to get out of politics, but eventually I guess I convinced myself that I was the only one that had the experience to pull them out of this problem. So we did, and I won pretty easy. You know, had 5 opponents, I think 4 or 5 opponents, and I won with a 65% of the vote.
Yeah.
It comes from experience of it. You know, I campaigned so many years, now I know how to do this anyway. So I did that. There are several problems. One, when I walked in the office, they didn't hand me credit. Well, most of the people they did business were friends of mine that I'd helped when I was a state senator. So they said, Senator, we'll help you, but we'll just help you. So we got it going again, and then I went through the books and found they had money to pay, they just weren't paying. I had no idea why. And I said, you're going to pay your bills. Everybody pays their bills. And that's one of the things I had to go through for a long time trying to get that straight. The second thing is how you look at yourself is important. Working for the tribe should be looked at as a profession, you know, something honorable to do, just like if you're working for the state or federal government, how you dress, how you behave, how you talk. And the first day I show up here, there's a young man, he's got jeans on and writings all over his old t-shirt, smoking. Well, I hired a gentleman who was a great friend of mine who was head of personnel for the Army for a long time. It was Colonel Leon Lusty. And I said, Colonel, we need to get this together. So first day he went up, got the staff together, so you come in jeans and t-shirt tomorrow, don't come, because you're out of a job. Second day I came to work and he's sitting at the door. He looked up at me and says, Chief, you're 7 minutes late. Okay, won't do that again, Colonel. So, and it took that to say, you're professionals, dress like a professional, behave like a professional. And the complaint was that they were abusive on the phones. We had to correct that. State employees have been bad about that, and others. So I'm aware of that. It's just not an Indian problem. It's just working with people to make them feel good about their job and let them know what their job is. You know, we ended up with a pretty professional staff. Because I always wear a suit because I was taught to wear a suit in the legislature. Well, as soon as I leave there, I put my jeans back on. But while I'm working, I'm representing the tribe. One of the more serious problems, the one thing I wanted to do, if nothing else, besides getting the finances together was to create a tribal court. For the lifetime of the Seminole tribe, they have not had a tribal court. The Chickasaws, Choctaws, Cherokees, Creeks, they've all had tribal courts from the beginning of the last century. They've had tribal courts. We have not. It's always been that council. And it was a battle to get it passed because we had to spend a lot of money and time and effort to get out there and convince people this right thing to do. And there are those who didn't want to change and who was fighting against it, but we changed it. And so that, I think of all the things that I did for the tribe, that was probably the biggest single thing I did for them that could help them to become a government and to be a responsible government. So they had that, but we did other things. I set up a land fund to purchase lands for the Seminole. We have very small land, and I'm pretty good at selecting real estate properties, and so we went and bought properties in around Seminole, bought a little office plaza. And whenever I had monies coming in for a grant, I said, we're not going to lease. We'll go buy it and we'll rent from ourselves, and that's what I did. But we always found good properties that we could go, so we expanded the land base for the Seminoles as well while we're doing that. But the one that I work on when I was at state level, among other things, is one for domestic violence. Established and purchased land out of the area, got a nice out of the place, and funded a domestic violence program with a home. And so that's, to my knowledge, just underway right now. So there were several things we did that I think made a difference. And, but I was so tired. I really was.
Ready to get back to your art. Well, you've done a lot of exhibiting, actually overseas. Your showing overseas goes back many years. And
the first art show I had in in other countries, in Vienna, Austria. And I was just a young kid, didn't know what I was
Your
doing.
first time?
Yeah, and had a show there, and it was and I think I was only native there, but they had a reception for us at the palace, and the heads of states and the royalty from that part of the world, princesses, dukes, they were there. And that's the first time in my life, the only time in my life I've been uncomfortable, because that's quite a, for a little Seminole boy from Seminole, Oklahoma, that's pretty powerful, you only read about this in books. But what I remember about that experience is not the art and so forth. This young lady was a beautiful young lady, was Princess somebody or other, had a emerald green dress on. Jules knocked her eyes out and she said, Mr. Haney, where are you from? Knowing that she didn't know where Oklahoma was, probably. I said, well, I'm from a place called Turkey Creek, Oklahoma. It's 10 miles north of a place called Seminole, Oklahoma. And Seminole's in Oklahoma, which is in the middle of the country. And what that did, it affirmed to me who I am. It says, yeah, I'm from somewhere, and that's where I'm from. It's important for me, not just geographically where I'm at, but ultimately I come from an Indian family, an Indian culture in this area right here. And so that was, for me, that was that, where you confirm who you are and know who you are, it was important for me.
What was one of the most exciting shows you had overseas, do you think?
Oh, I think probably the one I did was financially successful, at least, was in Singapore. They had arranged to have a big show there, and a holding company was sponsoring me. They owned the newspaper, television, magazine, everything in Singapore. And they sponsored me, asked me to come over, and I did, had an art show. Weeks before I arrived, I sent them all kinds of photos. They were asking about my picture, photo of myself rather, and photos of my artwork, and they started putting those on everything, their whole system. By the time I get to Singapore, I'm walking down streets, and millions of people said, "Oh, you're the Red Indian." That's what they referred to us as, Red Indians. Yeah. But that was a highly successful show, and it was one of my entries into other cultures. Since that time, in the legislature, I have had the opportunity to establish commerce offices in Singapore and work with people there to have better understanding.
Right.
Yeah, that was great, but that was one of my better ones.
And you've been to China quite a bit.
I have for 30 years. I'm not exactly sure what started. I do. The first trip I made to I don't know what year it was on behalf of David Warren at OU to go explore the possibilities of getting students to OU. And so that was my assignment. So I went, and the fact that I was senator elevated me to the status of politician. And so it was the government in China who took care of me, made sure everything went right, and so forth and so on. So that was a good experience. And from then, I've been there many times, and more recently, it's a different purpose. I have a new business. I'm 71, but I have to find something to do. So I have a partner. He and I have a business development company, and what we do, we find Oklahoma companies or even across the country who may want financing for large projects. In fact, we have many investors in China today that go all around the world and buy properties, real estate, oil and gas, mining. You name it, wherever they can make money, they're out there. And I just have a real connection with Chinese people. I just have this ability to work and understand and just, with people. And so I've got some good contacts there. I have some clients who are looking at some business possibilities. And I will say this, I don't take anything for less than $50 million projects, because it's not worth my time. I'm retired. If I'm going to work, I need to make a little something out of it, So that's what I do.
Do you feel a connection with Chinese art too?
Not necessarily. I collect Chinese art,
Mm-hmm.
and I collect Chinese art. Every time I go to China, though, they always introduce me to the top artists in China, which is always fun.
Yeah.
You know, I've gotten work from them, and usually if they give me something, I'll sit down at their studio and do a little painting for them or something. You know,
Oh,
so it's fun.
that
Doing
is
that.
fun. Well, in terms of your media and techniques, starting with painting, I guess, has acrylic pretty much been your preferred medium?
It is. It may not even be my preferred aesthetically. It's preferred because oil painting takes so long to dry. And I've had the experience of starting oil painting over here with this emotion and feel for it. Took so long, by the time I got to the other end, it wasn't that same feel. With acrylic, it's almost fast as watercolors.
Mm-hmm.
So once I start with acrylic, I almost go through it, you know, just one sweep. And you can maintain that momentum that you have, that, you know, whatever those emotions are, that, you know, the creativity, whatever you want to call it, is going through there, it just kind of moves like this. The other one is slows, and you know, it's hard to govern. I wish it was a faster medium. I'd probably use oils.
And you've done quite a few monoprints, I guess?
I've done monoprints, lithographs, whatever, as time permits.
Mm-hmm.
I wished I had more time to do it, but as you have already pointed out, I have business interests, I have political involvement. I taught a couple of years at OCU in area business, marketing, and I was on their board for a decade, and I'm still active. I'm not today. I'm off of most things, but the cultural center,
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma City, was my creation in the beginning, and so I serve on that board, and that's probably the only one I do.
Right.
I have been invited to be on the board for the Creativity Conference of Asian Countries.
Wow. That might be kind of fun.
Well, I'll give it some thought.
How do you think then your painting style has changed over the years?
Just evolution. I think it just, as your life changes, you know, the way you look at life, it just changes with that. But I'm always moving towards something that's comfortable for me. I don't do things, the only hard thing for me to do in art, and I've had 3 classes, is pottery. I cannot do pottery. So I just give up on that.
Yeah.
But the rest of it, I seem to be able to do marginally well at it. But you have to understand about my life is that I probably spent 10% of my life, if that much, doing art.
Mm.
If I could do 20%, at least logic tells me I could be twice as good. But I'll never be there. But it's a combination of art good enough and exceptional marketing ability.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, a lot of artists don't have that second part. Great
Right.
artists, but they can starve to death. A good artist can starve to death.
Right.
Yeah.
I know you use live models in your paintings and often family members. Why is it important to have a live model?
Oh, there's something about using a model that gives depth to what you're doing. I use a lot of photos, but then you get, there is that flatness. If you look at something in 3-dimensional, particularly with some of the kind of work I do, it gives it volume, I guess, or gives it perspective that you miss
Mm-hmm.
if it's just with a 2-dimensional image that you're looking at.
And of course, then when you're working in sculpture, you're doing that 3-dimensional thing. Do you think there's any carryover, and you work realistically? Is there any carryover from painting to sculpture? No?
Only in that I try to make sure that the anatomy or things are correct.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I'm sure it works differently with other people. For me, sculpting is a better medium for me now. Having said that, the school I went to in Philadelphia, much of it focused on planning. So when I was 29 years old, I planned the rest of my life out.
Is that right?
At 35, I was going to be in tribal government. I was. 40, I was going to be in state politics. I was. I planned to be there 10 years, go get my doctorate, teach at university, come back and da. Except when I got my 10 years in the legislature, I'm pretty powerful and able to do many, many good things for people. And I really enjoyed it, so I stayed, didn't ever go get my doctorate. So I did that, but I have taught at the university. I guess that counts for something.
Right.
But then the bottom line to all that is I decided when I was 55 I was going to start sculpting. I missed it by 1 year. I was 56. See?
So that's when you produced your first series that you
when I
commercially
first
marketed.
did the large monumental
You did
stuff.
the
I had done some along the way.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, I had done some other along the way, but that's when I got. I guess that's one way of saying I didn't paint anymore. I don't paint today.
Okay, I was
just
wondering
put
if you
that
were
back,
just doing sculpture.
just doing sculpting now, because at my age, you know, you can only do so much with your life. So I have to plan my life in time now. So time management is the biggest thing in my life. It's making sure that I'm able to accomplish some measure of success. As a general rule, on a daily basis, I make a list of things I have to do. Sometimes I have as many as 50 things. Well, once I get them written down, I don't have to think about I need to do it. I look at my list. Oh, this, and I categorize them by the importance and so forth. And I just start doing them without thinking. And at the end of the time, at least at the end of the day, I know I did something, you know.
And, you know, it's not just sculpture, it's actually pretty monumental sculpture for the most part.
It is.
You
Yeah.
enjoy working in that scale.
Well, I do, because it, for me, I guess for the art part, it just makes me feel like I did accomplish something in my art. Not as much as I could have, but perhaps life wouldn't intend to be that way for me, because I was involved in so many other things, and I've had a blessed life. Now, it's not always been rosy. It's kind of like running for governor. I'm glad I did. Didn't like to get beat, but somebody had to win, somebody had to lose. And I don't always win. That's what people have to understand. While I've been successful in many things, there's been times I just fell flat on my face, and being who I am and what I believe as a Native person, I get back up and dust myself off, and maybe have to go in a different direction, but I'll get up and keep going, see. I've started over, I don't know how many times.
I think you've kind of hinted at what your creative process is from the time you kind of get an idea, but can you take us through that just quickly?
Not real complicated, for one. Don't make it any more complicated than it is. For me, I had the complication of getting it done. But as far as the process is concerned, once the image is in my mind and a composition has been formed, then I start piecing it together. For instance, I'm doing this horse and rider. Well, I've got to do the horse. Well, so I've got the horse. Now, I spend a great deal of time just studying anatomy, muscle structure, and I go see the horse all the time, and
Is it a horse that you have here on the property? Or?
Right. And that's taken me a while. I should finish that, I think, in 10 to 15 days. A rider goes on top of it. That should be done within the same period. So in 30 days, I should have that ready. It will be enlarged to 12 feet tall and go out Remington Park. But once I get that part done, then it goes to a company here in Norman, a digital company, and they take an image of that sculpture, and they can make it any size I want.
Oh, wow.
And it comes back to me in styrofoam identical to the image they took. The foundry will take they'll do about a 1/4 inch of clay around it, and when it's standing like the Guardian, it was huge. It looked very heavy, but the fact is it's cut into many pieces, and I can move them around.
Right.
Because it's styrofoam.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And so, but then once you've got it enlarged and you've got everything in place and it looks right, then they start chopping it up. the Guardian is made into 50 different pieces. And that's for the purpose of being able to fit into one of the vats that they have for the process. And once they do that and they cast it, then they weld it back together. And then it's very crude looking bronze image, but then that's when you put the patina on, which is the coloring, as you know. And then once they put the coloring, it looks like one piece. I mean, that's a simple way of putting it, but that's basically what happens. I used to stay along with the whole process, kind of keep an eye on it.
Right. Looking back on your career, what do you think was kind of a fork in the road moment when you could have gone one direction, but you went a different one?
Can't say. I guess I've kind of done what I want to do along the way. And there was no timing. It just when the time was right to do something, I just did it. So that's, I don't know what that fork in the road was. Now there was one fork in the road it does affect my life. You know, smoking cigarettes was a cultural thing with our Native people. And we used tobacco all the time. My dad gave me permission to smoke when I was 14. So by the time I was like 20 or something, I was smoking 2 packs a day. Just back from the military and going to Bacon and had a lot of beer in my room, smoking a lot, playing a lot of cards. And one day I was standing out on a campus of college and look, my hands are just shaking like this. I thought, oh God, I can't be an artist like this. And I want to make something of myself. I can't be doing this. And right at that time and at that moment, I quit smoking, I quit drinking. There was no tapering off, there's no tapes or nothing. I decided, I'm not doing this no more, and I quit. I'm not even sure I thought about it too much. I just decided to quit. And to me, that was, I guess it's some sort of miracle since people have such a hard time, you know, because I smoked a lot. I think 2 packs a day, that's a lot. You know,
That's an amazing story.
that, you know, it's
What,
that was a turning point right there. Yeah.
what has been one of the low points of your career, do you think?
Oh, when you talk about career life and career like this, is when I lost my son. He was 18 the day before graduation. Got killed in a car wreck. And that was devastating. I mean, I look back on that experience and that was the worst experience I've ever had in my life. Continues to be. I hope I never lose another child. I want to be gone before that happens. But when that happened, I was 3 weeks away from deciding whether to run for another term in the legislature. And out of self-preservation, I decided to run, to keep busy. And that's what I did. I just kept busy. Get up 6:30 every morning. My friend picked me up, bring me home midnight every night. We just campaigned the whole thing. We had a lot of fun, me and I were just with my best friend. And so, but that was kind of what we did. And that was probably a low point. But what happened is that in oils, I created a painting called Emptiness Has a Claim on Death.
Oh.
And it was a powerful painting. Probably speaks more than anything I've ever done that catches me personally in my emotion. And it's a painting of a Seminole man, traditional clothing and evening. And from here to here is transparent. And so you can see through the body, you know. Because that's how you feel when you lose somebody that's so close to you. You feel emptiness. You feel, but at the same time, it's like the whole inside is concrete. It's a strange, you know, feeling, but that emptiness, and that's why I call it Emptiness Has a Claim on Death. But that helped me that was my therapy, to deal with that issue. But that's when it also settled in on me. I'm painting my emotions with about everything I do, not all, but most of what I do. is really coming from, that's that artist spirit. That's that artist, whatever that is that comes out of an artist that really has something to say. I might only do 2 to 5 things a year that really makes an impact. I may do several. I'm just trying to look around, but there's something will come through. Usually it comes through when I don't, when I'm doing a piece of work that I'm doing for myself. Okay? So
You have that freedom. And
I have that freedom. I don't have to worry, well, will they like this? I wonder if they like this color versus say I don't have to do that. So I do that. But then one of the things that can come out, and life can change anyway, in a lot of perspectives. But my son was married. He was in high school. He was married. He had a job and took care of his family. And he had a son that was born a month after his death. Today, his son is 27, 28, and he's vice president of the bank.
Wow.
See? So he called the other day. Well, it's an extension of him. It's just like his arm. So he's still with me in that way. Not everybody has the luxury of saying that, but my grandson is like my son's arm. You know, it's him. It's his arm. You know, and so I just have been really blessed with children who are talented and hardworking and brilliant and all those things that I'm not.
I don't know about that. Well, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you'd like to cover or you want to add before we look at your artwork?
No, probably not. There's a jillion things we've done, but no, I think we've done quite a bit. One night I was painting late, as I normally did, and 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, I was painting a small owl for a painting, and because of my condition of my eye at the time, my focus, I thought I saw some movement inside the feather. And I stopped and I thought, wow, if I could just intentionally do that. So I put that painting down and pulled this one out, just white canvas, and put a big owl on it, and I started putting images inside the owl.
Yeah.
Using the texture of the feathers and so forth, even in the eye. And once I did that, and I got through, I had my own style, so to speak.
Right.
And that's been a pretty popular concept. People enjoy that. It's almost like a conversation piece. I don't know how much of a art it is, but people like to talk about it, show it to their friends.
Seeing those hidden
I know
images.
people think that when I paint that I put in all my paintings, I do not.
Yeah. Right. How about this painting, Kelly?
It's called Kelly Brook, and Kelly Brook is my daughter. She lives in Norman. She's a musician. She's a professional photographer. She does some filmmaking, but she was a very young girl at the time we did this. In Seminole, she had her Seminole dress on, and the flowers around are the Indian blanket.
Yeah.
The Indian blanket is the legislation that I passed.
Oh.
Sometimes I do fun things
Cool.
in legislation, and that was one of the fun things. But it wasn't for anything. It was for something very specific. I wanted to do a collector plate, and I thought this would work out, and so that's why I painted it. But
Right.
It was my painting, so to speak, and I've not been willing to let this one go.
Right. Right. Well, it's good.
This painting is called the Light Horseman. To the at least to the 5 civilized tribes who had organized law enforcement as a part of their system of justice and judicial program of the different tribal governments. The Light Horsemen in this time were looked upon like the Texas Rangers or the Mounted Police of Canada. Their reputation was respected. They were feared. In fact, one of the records stated by one of the criminals during that period of time said the one thing he didn't want is those Light Horsemen coming after us, because they'll track us, they'll get us, and they'll kill us. But the Light Horsemen had that kind of authority. I'm currently writing a book with my son about a story about the Light Horsemen. starting in Florida and going through the Civil War period and then to Reconstruction and so forth, so on, and finally to statehood. So it's that's come along pretty well.
Oh, that's great. What's this piece called?
It's called Standing His Ground. It's a story that was told to me by Dr. Nivaquaya some 30 some odd years ago, and it kind of stayed with me. And when the time came, I visited with him and Woodgie Wachateker, who were great friends of mine, to show me exactly the clothing of the Comanches. I studied the clothing and went through books and artifacts, visited with them, and I did 2 large paintings before I finally they finally said, okay, it's okay now. So I try to make it as authentic as possible. That includes a lot of research.
Right.
But really, this is one of those stories too, where it's a dramatic image, but it has one message. It's called Standing His Ground for a reason. When faced with insurmountable odds, the warrior would tie himself to the ground and would go no further. And that's his statement to the oncoming warriors that I'm not moving anymore, this far I'm going, and let's just do what we got to do. But that's a statement of standing up for what you believe. And a family, teacher, businessman, father, mother, a child, we all get to that point and say no more, and we stand our ground. And so this is really more of the human condition than it is that one warrior.
Right. Okay, would you like to tell us about this?
This is the maquette for the 22-foot bronze sculpture that's on top of the state capitol. It's 22 inches, or about 20 inches, the original. So it was enlarged considerably to do the large one.
Yeah.
It is an image of a native person prior to the coming of the European. To the best of my ability, I used all native natural material for clothing and beads and other things so that it would not represent a particular tribe, but represent all tribes. The one feature about that I like is, unbeknownst to the people who I created it for, who thought that standing his ground was too confrontational, I went ahead and put the lance through the bottom of his leggings to tie him to the ground, because that's what I believe about Oklahoma. Is Oklahoma kind of people that really stand their ground, you know. And particularly at the state capitol, it's designed to make a statement about the legislature and people who are in power, that their responsibilities in the legislative bodies and judicial bodies and so on is to take care of the legal rights of the people in the state of Oklahoma. This is called Circle of Life. It was a commission piece by the Oklahoma Banking Commission, which is at 28th Street and North Lincoln Boulevard, just 2 blocks north of the state capitol. The original size is 5 feet tall. This is a replica. The maquette is 21 inches tall. It is a combination of bronze and stainless steel. The design is the use of what I call negative space design, so that certain parts of the body is missing, but it still is designed so that it looks like the whole. So that's basically what it is. There are several theological, philosophical concepts about the circle, mostly that most native people use the circle as that one event that ties all of our people together to some degree. It represents the 4 seasons. It represents the beginning of life to death and recycling of life, as it were. And then it also represents that all people no matter where they live and who they are, whatever their situation is, are of equal value on that circle. And that Creator, He places equal value on all people throughout the world.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh,
Kelly.
it's okay. Had to do something.